I'm not looking for them to help me, but I don't want them to make it harder.
Welcome to the latest episode of Over a Pint. This week we're doing a panel episode to talk about racism in the Canadian real estate industry. So I'm very excited to get this one going. I have 4 guests, so this is normally a bigger episode than we're used to doing, which I like because we get more opinions on what's going on within the industry. So I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves. So we'll start with Devel.
Hi, everybody. My name is Devel Morrison. I'm a broker with Bosley Real Estate. I work and live in the Midtown area, and I guess I work anywhere from North York to the beach to Mimico. Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. And Chuku.
Hi there. My name is Chuku. I'm a broker with iPro Realty. I have my own team under Sherlock Holmes. You've probably seen the branding already. We pretty much cover throughout the GTA. We've just expanded throughout the West. So we cover in Kitchener, Guelph, Cambridge, and also parts of Hamilton. Thank you very much for adding me. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks for coming on.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sheena Thompson. I've been in the industry 5 years. I'm with Right at Home, and I am the founder of Black Realtors Association. And in my business, I cover Peel, Toronto, and Durham region.
Awesome. And Natalie?
Hi, guys. I'm Natalie Lewin from Remax Hallmark, and a little bit about myself. I've been in this industry for nearly 20 years. I cover all of Toronto and Durham, and looking forward to having this chat with you. Thank you, Andrew, for inviting us, and thank you, Devel, for reaching out to us.
No problem.
Yes, again, thanks, Devel. So I originally, when I started this episode, reached out to Devel, and then she basically made a post. I guess you guys have a Facebook group.
Yes.
Asking for volunteers. So I appreciate you guys all volunteering to come on. Actually, what Natalie mentioned about 20 years in the industry, that's probably a good point too, is like, how long have each of you been in the industry?
I've been in the industry for 8 years now.
That's around 100.
For me, altogether, as a realtor, 5 years in the business. Oh man, I'm probably like 15 years.
Awesome.
And this is my 5th year in the business.
So this was prompted with everything that's going on in the US, and our team were kind of talking about what's going on and what we can do. And I wanted to actually bring it around to especially talk about like how it's impacted your careers within the real estate industry specifically. I mean, obviously there's discussions there on like the broader topic of race and racism. But I really want to focus on like your experiences within the industry. And there's obviously 2 sides of that. One being like how it's impacted you on the industry side of the business, and then in terms of working with clients. So if it's okay if you guys, I'd like to start kind of talking on the industry side of it. So if you have like what your personal experiences working like as a Black realtor has been within the industry and within your brokerage. Anyone can start.
So I'll start. In terms of the brokerage, I'll begin at, when I first started this industry, I had a lot of questions, and the brokerage that I was with, they really weren't equipped to answer the kind of questions that I had. Like, for example, I had a situation where I had a client, essentially she assumed I was white because I was speaking to her on the phone. And when I covered this, she essentially stopped communicating with me. So if I'm to go to my brokerage, my manager, and if I'm to say, this is the situation that, I'm dealing with, if he has no experience handling it, how do I, even begin to address this question with him? And then the other thing too is that I didn't really know a lot of Black realtors at that time. Right, they were nowhere to be found, and the one person that I knew, we didn't have that relationship where I could have this open discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I had an experience probably last year or so when I spoke to somebody on the phone. They told me what their budget was. They were looking at one of my listings, which happened to be in Midtown Toronto, and it was close to Leaside, and this person was looking to buy a house for his daughter, and he lived in Markham. And he basically, when I suggested that with his budget, he might want to consider homes in the Danforth area, he basically said to me, Well, I want the house to be in a white neighborhood. And so that's why he was saying he wanted to find a house in Leaside or Midtown Toronto. And I was just stunned that somebody said that to me on the phone. He had no idea that I was Black.
Who you're speaking to, right?
But I was just kind of floored that he said that. And so I just said, well, you know what, you're not going to find anything in this neighborhood in your budget. And I just got off the phone as quickly as possible because I just thought, but yeah, there's no one I can really go to in my office about a conversation like that. I go to myself, or I go to Facebook, quite frankly, because then I sort of posted on, the Toronto 2.0 group, because that was sort of my outlet. But yeah, in terms of, I'm one of the only, when I first started, I was one of the only Black people here. There are a couple of other Black agents, but not that many. I think there's 4 of us, maybe, out of a brokerage of about 250. So it's not a diverse company. So, I feel like I have to speak for Black people, which that's a lot.
Yeah.
Be quite tiring, I can imagine.
So I think that's an issue over the phone. I've had that several times. So the fortunate thing for me is I grew up with a father that's a realtor. And so he was the person that I went to when, sorry about that, when this happened. I had a lady very interested coming over, transferring over from South Africa. And this is probably nearly 2 decades ago. And great conversation until she met me. And she had a long pause, and basically, I thought you were somebody different, and I never heard back from her. And these situations continuously happen. But around that 2 decades ago, going to my father, he's like, that's something that we just deal with. And it's not even an issue that you even bring to your broker. That personally, you have to build up a thicker skin to deal with it, because he said you're going to continuously get that. Yeah. And I have gotten that, not only on the phone. So door knocking, they slam the door in your face. My first deal out in Bowmanville, I had an offer to present, 6 o'clock. Let's say it was 6 o'clock. Went to the home at the time, and the lady opened, saw me, and she screamed, "We are not selling anything, and we're not buying anything." Mm-hmm. So calmly, I said, "Oh, are you selling your house?" And she replied, "Yes." And not catching on that I was the agent, I'm like, "Are you doing a presentation right now?" "Well, I'm the other agent." Mm-hmm. And she nearly dropped her coffee that she was holding in her hand, because she didn't expect me, even though I was dressed in business attire and I had my card in my hand. And so this is something that we've been seeing for decades, and to some degree, it still happens.
Yeah. For me personally, it's pretty normal. When I answer the phone, or when I call, the second all they hear is a Caribbean accent. You can tell the experience, it changes. The attitude changes immediately. They assume that maybe I'm going to party. I won't take it seriously. I'm not professional. I have no idea what I'm doing. That's the impression that I'm getting. And that comes from the clientele. I won't dare door knock. I used to be in a job in my early 20s where we did door knock. And typically someone would just open the door, look at me, close the door very quickly, and they'll be afraid. They'll be afraid that someone's going to break into their house, or I'm some sort of threat. I also have a Nigerian name, so they assume right off the bat there's going to be some sort of scam. Mm-hmm. In terms of my dealings with other realtors in the beginning, I've had experiences where realtors, they'll look at me. Typically we would, if there's a realtor before you and they have the key, they'll ask you for your card and so forth, and you'll exchange keys and so forth. Mostly that's not my experience. I would say probably 60% of the time, they would immediately look at me, they'll be terrified, right? They would immediately take the key, throw it into the locker right in front of me. I'm talking about we're right in front of each other. Close it, do the dial, and then scurry off. I've had agents
I've had that once.
come to my own open house and ask me whether or not, where's the realtor? And I'm telling them, I'm the realtor, look at the name. You can see CHUKWU. It's clearly not a Caucasian person. So why are you looking at my assistant and not looking at me? I've had broker of records and brokers asking me to change my name. My name is Chukwu Uzoro. If you look in the industry, many of us are very diverse. You've seen people from Latvia, people from basically various Greek people with Apollos and so forth or whatever. My name is pretty much 6 letters, and they'll find extreme difficulty pronouncing my name after I give it to them, even though it's very simple, Chu and Ku. And I realized they can easily say Stan Pulapoulos, no problem, over and over again, right? So in terms of the experience as a Black male, you do have the issues when it comes to acquiring clientele. Being a Black man with a Nigerian name, they assume that you're into fraud. Being a Black man with a Nigerian name with a Caribbean accent, they assume that you're not professional. And this goes with the people you work with. This also traverses the clientele that you're trying to reach. And it basically pigeonholes you into a certain genre of clientele. All right, basically people who understand that not all Nigerians, not even all Nigerians, Nigerians aren't criminals. People who believe understand that Caribbean people, because you have an accent, you can be extremely professional and extremely successful, and you know what you're doing. So in terms of, I would say that probably the biggest impact is just the lack of understanding, lack of education, just straight discrimination. It pretty much forces you to overcompensate by overachieving, which is what we do anyway. But it's a regular it's on a regular basis. You can win all I won a ton of awards, right? I'm one of the top guys in iPro, but it really doesn't matter. You still have to prove yourself over and over and over again that you know what you're talking about, that you're actually competent. You can show them for years. You've been selling under a week for many, many years, but still, when I'm doing a presentation, it really doesn't matter. Someone who just came on board, who has a nice white face, such as yours, Andrew, can easily get that presentation strictly because of the way that you look and the way that you speak, and that's it. Meanwhile, I'm here with the proof to back it up, and it means nothing. So that's my experience.
Yeah, it's funny to talk about that. I went to a presentation last year in Hamilton, and I can't remember the agent, but it was a white agent, white male agent, and he might have been in his 20s, 30s, I don't remember. But yes, obviously he was from a real estate family, so he was born into it, running a team, yada, yada, yada. But, he's talking about at the presentation how he just goes to the presentations wearing whatever. He'll go in his jeans and his t-shirt. He doesn't dress up. And I was just so incensed, actually, that he said that, because I said, I can't do that. When I go to a presentation, I'm dressed to the nines. I'm dressed to the nines all the time, because I don't have the luxury of going into a presentation looking like a slob, because it's
No.
And, it's like he doesn't even understand that he can get away with doing that and he can still get business, but I can't do that.
Yeah,
it's funny how the experiences are totally different. I have a mastermind every morning at 8 a.m. And one of the attendees, male, white, been in the business over 30 years. And this morning we were talking about door knocking. He said in his entire career, he had 2. I asked him to repeat, what does he mean 2? He had 2 horrible experiences. That one, somebody slammed the door in his face, and somebody recently said the F word and ripped up the flyer that he was delivering. And I was like, real 2? That's in a day or a week at most. That's my regular experience. And I was blown away that how different our experiences are doing the same activity.
How much do you guys find like it changes how you prospect for new business?
Well, for me, I live in Georgetown, and there's a bit of a history there. I know that knocking on doors with my accent and the way and my appearance isn't something that's going to garner me any business whatsoever. So I have to be very mindful. I also know that in many communities, where the house prices are, I guess, let's say anything over 700,000 and above, the majority, if it's majority Caucasian or anything that's not majority Black, the odds of my success are extremely low, right? If the fact that a Black male is knocking on your door isn't enough to prevent you from even getting the door open in the first place, it would definitely be the accent or one or the other. They don't want to hear you, because it's not the norm to see Black people as realtors. It's not normal at all. You don't really see it, right? And it's definitely not normal for a Black male to be knocking on your door, period. And of course, what's happening out there well, we'll get into that topic afterwards, but there is this fear that Black males are violent, right? Based on the portrayal on television. You see rap videos, you see the crimes and so forth, and it's overemphasized in the media, so people get the wrong impression. The same thing when it comes to frauds in Nigerian. That's why the association between Nigerians and fraud is there, right? I've worked in law enforcement for a very long time, and I can tell you it's widespread amongst everyone. However, if you look in the news, if you look in the news articles, what gets more sensationalized? Is it the white collar crime, right? Or is it the fraud that's done by certain minority groups? So these sort of things are what impacts me as a Black male realtor with a Nigerian name. And that's why prospecting and door knocking isn't something that I do.
Yeah, I do find, for example, I send out flyers a lot, and I find that, you know, the white male guy who has shitty flyers, shitty copy, shitty marketing, he can get far more listings than I can. Even though, you know, I get emails from people all the time saying, your marketing is really good. I like what you put out, blah, 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 blah. Just those people who are saying that aren't about to sell or buy. But it's just interesting to me that I get compliments all the time, even from other agents, about what I put out there, but it does not yield me as much business as, you know, random white guy agent who just has shitty marketing, but people would hire him over hiring me. So, I mean, I get a lot of my business from my friends and my sphere of influence because they trust me and they know that I know what I'm talking about. So I find that that helps a lot for sure.
Yeah.
So my experience is a bit like you, Devel, in that with my client base, in fact, it's so diverse that I think it's actually a benefit for me. I have not just different colors, but also, you know, different sexualities, and they all come to me and they all trust me. And this is primarily how I get my business. Is primarily I work my network, because in this sense I don't have to go out and prove myself every time. And once, you know, I've gained them not only as a friend but as a client, they come back to me and they ask me questions even long after it has closed. Today, actually, a client is having a baby and I have to reach out to them. I just remembered today's Wednesday, baby day. But this is the kind of relationship that, you know, I want to build, not only with my clients, but also like in the community of Black Realtors. And, you know, that's why I'm fortunate that, you know, we decided to basically have this conversation, because it needs to be said.
And I would just add too, when I look at the makeup of my clients, I would say it's a lot of people who, so I notice I have a lot of gay clients. I'll have Asian clients. I've got Black clients. I've got brown clients. I definitely have some white clients. I've got some Jewish clients. It's almost like everybody else who feels like an other is comfortable being my client.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have as many of the WASPy clients unless they are actual personal friends of mine because they trust me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things. It seems like everybody who isn't part of everybody else feels comfortable with me.
Yeah, this is my experience.
I think the majority of my clientele tend to be Black or tend to be mixed couples. I would say almost 90%. They either have a husband that's Black or a wife that's Black, or I would say the 5% of my white clientele, they're only strictly interested in the results. So they would see my results, they would see that it's being sold over asking them blah, 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 all that wonderful marketing crap. But they will see the results, and that's literally what they want. They don't want to have a relationship. They're not interested in having this deep conversation and seeing how things are or being involved. Even my Asian clients is the exact same thing. when they reach out to me, it's strictly for results. I'm looking for this very, very specific thing. Help me find it. I need you to do an analysis for this property. Help me get it done. I need to find something very, very specific within a certain period of time. Get it done. That is it. So I realized that the relationship I have with Blacks, it's more, hey, could you help me figure this out? I get a lot more messages, a lot more text messages, a lot more need for there to be more of an education. Yeah. I realize with the quote unquote others, it's just business owned, just business. That's it. So we don't, and it's a very different approach. Like with mostly my Black and my mixed race clientele, they want to know about my family. They want to know how long I'm in the business. They say they follow my Facebook. They're interested in my Instagram. They're asking me about my jacket and my life and my kids and dog and all that stuff. When it comes to the other clientele, it's strictly about the home, the business, the numbers, and that is it.
So what are you looking for in terms of I don't know if any say you're moving brokerages, does this come into play kind of how they can support you at a brokerage level, or is there not enough options out there in terms of Black broker owners even that are in the industry? Because I know at the leadership level it is mostly white people.
For me, that doesn't come into play for me at all. I've been in 3 brokerages, started at Century 21, and that I would say had the most diverse. But the other brokerages, I'm not looking for them to help me with my struggles as a Black woman at all.
I'm not looking for them to help me, but I don't want them to make it harder. Right? So I think that's the difference, right? I had a situation recently at my brokerage where I've had a couple situations at my brokerage where I've had to step in and do something. And, it's funny when you work in a corporation, sometimes you don't feel comfortable saying anything, but I guess I'm realizing I'm a senior agent. I'm in the top 20 and I need to be really vocal because I can be. And, they're listening, but there's work to be done.
What could brokerages do that, in terms of not making it harder? What should they what do you find they're doing to make it harder that you've seen in the past?
I would say it's the same thing I think for the general public. It's just that if they don't understand their privilege and they don't understand where their privilege comes from, then it's hard for them to communicate that way. Yeah. So I think that's really it. And that's just for the general public in general. Is just understanding your privilege and what that affords you. And some people don't. So, for example, I posted on my brokerage Facebook page last night that, for me, when I go shopping in a store, I always take the receipt. So I don't get shoplifting. Yeah. It's that basic thing, people don't realize that that's what I do every single day.
I think a part of it as well is that brokerages, they should start treating themselves as corporations and as business, especially the global ones, right? You would notice places like the Walmarts and all that, they tend, or Starbucks, for instance, they tend to include diversity training for all of their employees. Even though we're licensed contractors, we do interact with the public. We are more or less employees within that brokerage, but you realize that the brokerages generally will put more of an effort towards sales training. They'll put more an effort towards getting a certain sort of designation, hitting your sales targets. These are the sort of seminars that are pretty much promoted. But when is the last time have you seen any brokerage saying, hey, you know what? Let's actually put together something or whatever that talks about diversity. Let's showcase Black suppliers. Let's showcase Black hardware owners and so forth. Let's try to encourage more recruitment of Black youth into the business. You don't really see brokerages doing anything that specific. You might find individual realtors, Black realtors, reaching out to the community and trying to help them out and tell them about real estate, tell them about being a realtor, talking about the same struggle. But brokerages really, from what I'm seeing, generally speaking, it's sales oriented and they really don't care. It's really more about the bottom line.
It's interesting. I mean, we recently had sensitivity training at our brokerage, but it came about because of an incident, right? So it was being reactive versus proactive. The one thing that I think is good is that we have a breakfast program that does support some schools that are in predominantly Black neighborhoods. Um, and people, you know, are committed to volunteering, to providing breakfast to those kids. And so I do think that's really good that we're doing those kinds of things.
I think it would be
I
really
think,
helpful if we had something like discrimination training for realtors in managing the public, because there are a lot of scenarios like the one I mentioned, you know, at the beginning, where, you know, as a broker, how would you manage that situation, even if you're not part of this population? But also realtor to realtor, when we come across situations where, you know, in fact, that a realtor is not acting in accordance with the law when it comes to discrimination, although they're technically obligated to follow the request of their client. If their client is asking them to do something that is wrong, like not, let's say, let a place to a specific group, they have a responsibility to talk to their clients about that and to basically say it's not okay. So that would be one of the things that a brokerage could do to really open up the discussion, and to also, I know, set a standard so that we can all fall in line, because discrimination and racism, it's all of our problems. It's not just a Black issue. It's not just, and it's also discrimination across sexuality as well. It's all of our responsibilities, right?
Yeah. Natalie, you started talking there as well. Do you have a point to add?
I do. Thank you, Andrew. I think that brokerages really just need to ask the questions. How are you navigating this space? Real estate's lonely as it standalone. So when you throw race into it, that's another challenge that many have to deal with. So I think just the questions, the conversations have to happen. Open, honest conversation. This is how I feel. This is how I feel in this space.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that sometimes they're just clueless and it's uncomfortable, so they don't ask.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also uncomfortable from my side, so I don't speak because they won't understand.
Yeah.
So, you know, I farm in a neighborhood, North Toronto, and it took me years, probably over a decade, to start this and even door knock it for these reasons. So I stayed quiet and afraid. I remember one day, knocked one door or maybe a few doors, got this horrible reaction, and I went in my car. But I had a white colleague in the neighborhood that said, just don't bother. Like, really work with your own people, because you're going to have such an upward swim. So what that comes down to is when we look at the diverse neighborhoods, how these neighborhoods, the demographics of these neighborhoods, the higher income properties are held usually by non-Blacks. So if we're told, then stay in your own neck of the woods, basically. And you know what? I don't think that he was being harsh, but he felt you're going to have an upward battle working in this neighborhood. But then it comes down to, here's the disproportions in income. If we're only supposed to go in this one neighborhood, whether we have skills to work everywhere, but we're only pigeonholed to these one neighborhood, then again, you get this continue widening the gap of income. And so I think these things need to be spoken about. And there's a Black gentleman in the area that I farm, and he's like, I love that you're here. Every time you knock my door, I love to see it. And he doesn't understand why more Black people don't knock these doors, because we have all rights. If we're going to do the work and we are professional, we have right to that as well.
No, that's very true. I mean, I've door knocked on my street and I live close by to you. I generally don't I've door knocked a little bit, but I door knock my street only, just because that way I can say that's my house.
Right.
Because that's kind of my intro, and my license plate, for example, has my name on it. So I know. It's like, yeah, I'm right here. I live right there. So people know. So, and then I created a Facebook group for people on my street, which some people have joined. But it's funny, it's taken a while to get some traction. But now the group's got over 40 people on there. So I consider that pretty good for my street. But that's kind of some of the stuff. And I mean, I'm not door knocking now, obviously, because of COVID. And I'm not sure when I'll go back to it because of COVID. But I did door knock a few times, and it was okay.
I wish I had that luxury. Not gonna happen. Yeah, I know better. I really know better. It'll probably take maybe the next generation for it to be okay with anyone that sounds like me with my name knocking or looks like me knocking on anyone's door. I think when it comes to males, especially black males and so forth, that perception of violence, knocking on someone's door isn't exactly safe for us. And not only that too, I've had many situations. I mean, some of you have actually seen my truck. My truck is wrapped. I drive a F-150. It's wrapped. It's very, very visible. My name's in the back. My brokerage is on it. There's a big, gigantic fox. That's my logo and everything. And I've had situation. I've driven in neighborhoods just to see my clientele and have police follow me. I have had people actually call the cops on me while I'm working, while I'm about to actually enter the doors. I've had neighbors yell at me and say, "Hey, why are you here? Like, what are you doing knocking on this door?" I'm saying, "I have the key. I am listing this house in Shelburne." So the reality of it is that maybe it's a bit different with ladies. Maybe the perception is different. I believe strongly the perception is different when it comes to women.
It is.
That threat perception really isn't there. Not as much, at least not as much in my opinion. Black male, beard and so forth, knocking on the door. I can wear whatever the heck I want. They're thinking breaking in or fraud or God knows what.
The funny thing though, so I don't think that I'm 5'4", so I don't know what the perception is, but in my mind, I always want it to be visible that I'm either knocking on the door, I'm opening a lockbox, and I have a purpose to be here. That's always in my head. And regardless of how you're dressed, I've had people lock their doors. They sometimes, and I don't know what their perception is behind. I don't know if that's how they deal with everybody, but I know what I'm thinking. That I always have to, I have to make it known. Hey, I have a purpose here in this space.
So new agents coming on, like I know one of the perceptions, and like you hear people talk about it a lot, of like, if I encounter something like racism or sexism, even, like it was a big conversation for me too, is like it's easier just to stay quiet and not do anything. Like, what would your recommendations for people new to the industry be, like when they do encounter these types of things?
I think for my thoughts are, I think new agents actually have it a little bit better. There's more of us, and there's more spaces that we can speak in. So Sheena, and I commend you, Sheena, for starting the group with Black Realtors, that there's more conversations happening. So if we went back 2 decades or a few decades ago, there was less of us. So in speaking to my father and very senior agents, most of the Black Realtors, there was a small handful, but they would speak to each other. And so I think that handful has grown, and we have more people to reach out to say, hey, have you experienced this? This is what I'm going through. So I feel a little bit more hopeful that there's more of us to speak to and get their own perspectives. And this happening right now, Andrew, that I think now the conversation is broader, and this is amazing. Like, I think these uncomfortable conversations need to happen, absolutely need to happen. And I think more people now, from a woman of color perspective, that I'm more comfortable speaking about it. Because I don't usually post about race on my Facebook where I have everybody. I'm always worried about what is the perception going to be? Am I going to be the mad Black woman? And is it going to come off as I'm just bringing negativity? And that's not what I want. But I want you to understand, and I want you also to feel comfortable having that uncomfortable conversation with me, because I love everybody and I want everybody to love me and not look at me based on the color of my skin, but find out, who is Natalie? What does she know? How can she contribute to what's happening?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a good point, Natalie, because I never post anything about race.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, in the last week, yes, I've posted a lot about race.
Right.
And it's an awkward conversation. And, you know, I posted to my brokerage page today. It's like, I don't like talking about race. I really don't. But it's this awkward conversation that now we all do need to have, because it's important,
Mm-hmm.
because it's an important discussion that we all have and talk about, because we've really been sweeping it under the rug for a long time, you know? And so now it's just not sweeping it under the rug and talking about it. And I watch The Social every day, and Marcy Ian is one of the hosts of The Social. And, you know, I always look up to her and what she has to say. And, you know, in the last few days, she was just talking about, you know, as a Black journalist, getting out there and speaking about this, and more of us need to do it. And, she kind of really inspired me, you know, because Andrew, when you sent me that text, the first text about doing this, I was like, oh, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Public thing, like, oh, I don't know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know what? I went home and I watched The Social and I listened to Marcy, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And it's funny, I actually wrote her and told her and thanked her for inspiring me to say yes to your request. And she thanked me. But yeah, like it's hard.
One thing I've noticed as well when it comes to business as well, and I know I'm a business major, right? And I know one thing they always said, and one thing that we've been taught is to always be neutral, right? When it comes to your social stances. The last thing that you want to do as a business is to pretty much, we always keep saying pigeonhole, but essentially what happens is that as you keep on reaching out and talking about different issues, religion is one of them, racial issues is also another one of them, anything involving politics and so forth, you start to isolate yourself, and you start to isolate yourself from your clientele. So in terms of a business perspective, if you're looking at dollars and cents, having these sort of conversations, talking about anything involving anything other than just business, can very well have an effect on your business. Now, the thing is that when you mentioned like what should new agents do and so forth, as a new agent, if you came to me in the beginning of my business and said, hey, why don't you do a broadcast and let it out there know, to let people know that you have a hard time knocking on doors and people have issues with your name and so forth, it's going to have a negative impact, and it would. More than likely it would. The fact of the matter is that it takes a lot of security, financial security in knowing that I can get clientele whenever I want. I already have a big base no matter what. The impact on me is going to be so minimal because my demographic actually wants me to speak out on it. But I'm there, right? So I think when it comes to all of this, I think what's changed, like I've posted since for the last 4 years, if you look at my Facebook feed, about Black issues and racism and discrimination. I've talked about politics. I don't hold back personally because I know that at my level, there is no major effect. It's not going to significantly, the people who will be against what I'm saying are not my clientele. They're not my base anyway. So it really doesn't matter personally, right? So I think that in terms of brand new agents getting to this business, be very mindful. There is going to be an impact to your business. You are going to do some sort of isolation at some sort. So you will isolate some clientele, but at the same time, you got to keep in mind who's your niche? Who are your clientele, right? If your clientele are the ones that actually wants to hear from you, then by all means go ahead. If you're going towards a specific segment where they're typically they don't care, there's no real interest, then something like this can have an impact, a serious impact before you even get rolling.
Personally, I do not post on race and really just discrimination in general, because I find that, especially with my clientele, discrimination takes many different forms because there's so many different communities in my client base. Personally, and that I feel like it's best, discussed between us. So with my clients, when I meet with them, when we go to see properties, it's always in my mind, how can I serve them best based on the situation they're in? And that's why my business and, you know, just me in general, it's so personal and it's so community focused. That's basically how we came together, because I realized that we have there are things about us that will change the way the world views us, and those show up in real estate one way or the other, right? So that's my, so when it comes to like new agents, what I would say to them is find that community, find that person, find, you know, whomever who you can have these open discussions with, because if I had something like this when I started, I think this would have completely changed the way I go about real estate. But in a way, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a blessing, because it led us to where we are right now, and we could, you know, find each other. You know, where would we be if we didn't have this group to say, hey, yo, yeah, I know at least 200 Black Realtors now. When I started, I knew one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so if Black Realtors watching this, not part of the group, like where would they go?
So you can find us, Black Realtors Association. Just toss that in Facebook and you'll see the group. In terms of what you need in order to be a part of the group, you just need to be in Canada or Canadian. I'll obviously have a license. And then when it comes to identification, I'm not here to police your identity. So I'm not going to tell you who's Black and who isn't. You know whether you're Black or not. And I haven't had any situation like Rachel Dolezal. I haven't had any of that.
Right.
Open about what they are, right? And then there are people who are somewhere in between, and I'm like, listen, I can't tell you what you are. You know based on your experiences. So, you know, it's been very easy in that way, right? And so far it's been very helpful. Just knowing and just hearing our stories, it's been fantastic. I'm so appreciative of meeting you guys and hearing your stories, because it helps me. And I think it's going to help a lot of young realtors coming in. Just even seeing that we're there is important. Yeah. And you guys know I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
And are you guys supported at all by organized real estate? Like, do you look for support from organized real estate? Or like, is there anything on that side? Because I know there's not a lot of representation kind of in the leadership of organized real estate often. So I was curious, like, if you guys are involved at all, or what you'd be looking, like, could they do more to reach out to you guys to get you involved?
The Black Realtors specifically, or are you asking?
Like that group specifically, and then like at a like broader sense, like just reaching out.
Like OREA or RICO or anything along those lines. Yeah, no, I understand. Or even TREP. We see the posts that are coming out on a regular basis about signing up for whatever board or signing up for whatever group and so forth. But you have to understand, when it comes to the time and the spare time to do those sort of activities, if you're listening to the conversation that we're having, and we're saying that it's already difficult to be a Black realtor for whatever the reasons are, right? Adding another level of difficulty, or without even explaining what it is, that's what makes it difficult. Because essentially all of us are, I wouldn't say struggling, but we're pretty much having to prove ourselves and pretty much fight to even get a stronghold within this business. And if you look at the number of years that we're in the business for, you're hearing 5 years and 8 years and so forth. So you combine 5 to 8 years, regardless of if we're for the top 10 or top 20, top 5 or whatever it is, you factor in discrimination. You factor in that we all have lives and businesses and so forth, and we have to maintain it. We don't have, many of us do not have the luxury of actually venturing out into like an area to take on a top role, or venturing out to take on a board role, or to be part of an extra committee. I think part of it is just that either we don't know about it, right? So we've seen it come out, but we don't know enough about it to see if it's worth our while. The other question is whether or not it's going to inspire any sort of change, right? You join these, I've been parts of many, many boards trying to do wonderful, amazing things. And I know I went in there all pushing, oh, wow, it's going to be amazing. And you walk in there and you realize that even though you have a brilliant idea, because everyone else doesn't look like you or whatever, it gets shut down. So you realize it's a complete waste of time. So then you really got to balance your time and say, hey, where is my time best spent? Developing my business, supporting the Black community, or should I join OREA, where everyone is pretty much top white, top to bottom, or TREB, top to bottom? I already know, based on working in past organizations, what the experience is when it comes to being a Black person in these organizations. You don't really get hurt. So now do I join something for absolutely free just to not to get hurt again? So my thing is that if they want me to be involved, I would say, you know what, do a better attempt to actually reach out to us, explain to us what they want, try to have more inclusion inside of their ranks and make it extremely visible.
So, I mean, for me, I've definitely been asked quite a few times to get more involved in those things, because I have been lucky enough to be invited to some of the smaller area TREB events. But I find this whole bar of the fact that you have to join a committee in order to run for everything, I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried out for one committee and didn't get on.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, to Chuku's point, it just seems like it's very government-like, and very slow moving.
Mm-hmm.
What's accomplishing here? I'm the kind of person where it's got to be like this or I'm out. I do volunteer on other committees. I'm on the board of directors of a charity called Beautiful World Canada. And you know, I do volunteer. I'm running the Short-Term Accommodation Association of Prince Edward County. So I do a lot of other things, but I do things where I feel like my energy is more useful.
There you go. That's the key point.
You know, on TV a few times, so I've got lots of media contacts. So quite frankly, if I want something done, I'll do it myself.
True.
I'm not going to join these slow-moving boards because they're just too slow.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. And I also want to add on that, because I wanted to move over to like talking about like how it impacts like working with clients and like impact on your clients. Like where I mentioned, like I don't know, like Devel, you didn't read the question ahead of time. Like one was like the studies that came out when I was doing kind of research was that the majority of discrimination happens more on the rental side than on the ownership side.
It's both.
So talking about, that's what I wanted to get into, is like the study, like when I was reading it, almost dismissed the ownership side. So I wanted to like find out about that, and then, but then also like how it's impacted then experience on the rental side as well.
So on the rental side, I mean, there's a whole Facebook group called Renting While Black.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for Black people to share, you know, rentals, because Black people have a hard time renting. Because people look at them and say, you know what, I don't want you living in my place. So yeah, it's a huge problem.
Yeah.
And regardless of what they do, I have a gentleman, a client transferring from Nova Scotia,
Mm-hmm.
African, so very African name. He had a full conversation with a landlord the other day, full conversation. And he provided everything that she needed. He had pay stubs, job letter. And I mean, the rent is nothing for him. And she said, you know what? No, I don't want to rent right now through COVID. But guess what? The house is still listed. It's still listed. She didn't take it off like she said she would. It's still there. And this happens repeatedly.
Yeah.
And on the owner side, you don't see it as much, but I've seen it, not non-Black, but a Filipino lady. We were up in multiples, and I thought it would be amazing if she did a video. And that agent had the audacity to ask me, how is she going to pay for the mortgage?
Yep.
And she did not win. We did not win. And our price was better. Our deposit apparently was better from what I heard. And she didn't win because he didn't think that she would be able to qualify for the mortgage.
On that topic, it's actually also a problem, and I mentioned it a bit earlier, that, you know, realtors, that between ourselves, we are also part of the problem in that, like I said, when a client tells you to do something that is clearly discrimination, you need to be able to say to them, we're not doing this. And things that I come across quite often is when let's just use, for example, see a lot of this during leasing when they ask for photo ID. And in fact, I actually have a conversation with my clients when they're Black to say, hey, listen, this is our situation. It is wrong, but this is the reality. And I also have that conversation with my clients who are homosexuals and living in couples, right? Because you have two male names on a lease. I get questions from realtors like, oh, are they a couple, right? Like, why?
Doesn't matter. But you know what? I think where that happens though, Shayna, is that there's unconscious bias with the realtor as well.
Of course, but
so those things have to be dispelled.
Though, in our
Say that again.
In our professional capacity, it is our responsibility. We REBA 2002, but also, you know, Canadian guidelines on discrimination and racism, those are more important than any feelings you may have about a certain group.
Agreed.
Right? So you need to be aware of that. And if you aren't aware, then really what hope, you know, do we have for your landlords, right? And the tenants that are dealing with these things. You need to be the professional. You need to say, sorry, landlord, no, we can't do that. That's not how it works. This is Canada, period.
Okay. I just wanted to add
I would follow up with that though, is we also have, as the agents facing that, is we can report them. So reporting the agents and reporting the landlords, I think we also have to take that extra step if we want to see change, because if they have their unconscious bias and they're not following our guidelines, and not guidelines, this is what we are supposed to be following. It's a crime to not follow. But if they're not doing that, we have to take the responsibility and report them. And I think far too often, I'm going to speak for myself, is that there's so many things, there's so many infractions that I see, and I think to myself, I'm not going to be bothered with that. And I don't want to spend my time with that negative energy. But I think we do have to say, you know what? We do have to spend our time with this, even though it's a waste of time and we could be spending our time better. But how are we going to see change if we don't take that time to say, Rico, this is a problem. The landlord and tenant, this is a problem. This is what we are seeing. We're not going to see any change. We can't leave the onus to the perpetrator. They're not going to change.
Okay, I just wanted to add one point. You mentioned whether or not our clients are finding discrimination, whether they're renters or whether they're buyers, and whether it's goes to one side. I said it's pretty much equal. You've already heard from the rental side, so I'm not going to really bombard this whole Zoom call with that. I'll tell you the experiences from the buyer side. I think part of it, a big part of it, is also systemic within Canada. If you really start looking, get into your stats and Statistics Canada, and you start looking at the number of Black people who are discriminated against in the educational system, you'll sort of realize that many Black men, for instance, they are discriminated against and they're actually punished significantly harder, which makes them very difficult to graduate. You'll also look at more statistics talking about university. Many Black people want to go to university. The question is how many of them can actually afford to go. Then you look into the statistics, like for instance, the majority of Black women, they're one of the highest segments of post-secondary educated people within Canada. But if you look at the wage inequity amongst themselves and amongst Black males as well, it's extremely low. So when you factoring wage inequity, when you also look in terms of employment, right? You look at the stats and you talk about job satisfaction, you realize Black people are very satisfied. About 70% of us are considered to be, we say that we're satisfied in whatever job capacity that we are. But then if you look at the wage disparity, it's significantly lower than our white counterparts and pretty much anywhere else. If you're looking at home ownership, all of that has to play. If you're more than likely being kicked out of school, if more than likely, even if you happen to make it, and you want to go to post-secondary, but you can't afford it. If you actually make it past post-secondary, you have a job, but then the odds of you actually getting that higher paying job that can get you into those properties that are in the 700,000 range, the $800,000 range, the $1 million range. If you're consistently hitting that glass ceiling, no matter what you do and how hard you're doing, that in itself is a barrier in itself. So when you're talking about home ownership, these are the sort of issues that Black people are facing. So not to mention, so when you have discrimination and education, everything against you, and then you have a government policies that are creating stress tests, making it much more difficult for you to even get into a home. Not factoring the rising rents. Like many of us have clients who are renters who are paying $2,500, $3,000 a year, a month nonstop. But for some reason, they can't qualify for a mortgage for $2,500 or whatever for the exact same amount because of issues of down payment and for whatever it is. Credit's good, but they can't afford it, right? We don't have anything to pretty much level the playing field. If you look at the stats of newcomers coming into Canada, you'd realize 71% of Asians or Koreans and so forth are homeowners within 3 years of coming into Canada. You look at the Black experience, it's closer to 18%, right? So we don't, as Black people, if you look at established communities, you can find a Koreatown, you can find established areas with Asians, with Chinese, you can find Brampton with East Indians and so forth. You don't really find that strong, big community amongst the Blacks, and it does have a significant impact, right? The funds aren't there. You're dealing with inequity when it comes to wages. You're dealing with issues when it comes to the education. I think Peel Board not too long ago, what was it? They had a study that actually proved that Blacks were being discriminated for the longest while Black children were punished more harshly, and they condemned it. York had something very, very recent. I'm sure if Halton and Toronto did one, they would pretty much show the exact same experience. So this is happening from the time that our children, right, our people are actually children living here. And many of us have the exact same experience where you have a teacher who actually told you that you weren't good enough. You had principals who punished you unfairly. Our children are dealing with the exact same thing. They're putting EAs on us on a regular basis. You go with that mentality from when you're young that you're not good enough, combined with the fact that no one's teaching you about financial education, no one's telling you about money, no one's telling you about budget. Then you happen to graduate, if you're lucky enough to graduate, then they're telling you because of the way that you look and your name and so forth, and the fact that you're Black, the odds of you getting that higher echelon of education is significantly lower than your white peers, regardless of how hard you work. So I know that when we have these videos and we talk to the general public, you always get the eye rolls, because the notion is that if you work hard, right, you're gonna get exactly what you're looking for. You get what you deserve. I grew up with that mentality and that understanding that the harder I work, the more successful I'm going to be. Because I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago. When I came to Canada, I came with the rosy eyes. And I'm Canadian, by the way, just to make it very clear. But I came with that, the rose-colored glasses, that if I work really hard and I do whatever I want and I stay out of, I don't do any crime, and I be one of the good Black people, that everything will work out. And then you realize systemic racism. It's not that people will always come to you and say, hey, you N-word or whatever, you're not gonna make it. It's the things that you cannot see, right? When you realize that law enforcement can actually pull you over, happened to me, pull me over for no reason, put a gun towards my head. When you realize that in university, that you can be graded pretty much lower because the professor doesn't like you, happened to me. I'm a conservative. Professor told me she can't understand why I'm a Black conservative when there are so many people like MLK fighting for my rights. How dare me? Changed my mark from an A to a C. Dean can do anything about it. My children has been discriminated significantly in Halton region. I went all the way up to the what do you call them that does it anyway, to the highest levels. Superintendents, the overseers for the teachers did absolutely nothing about it. So when it comes to education, CMHC, the government's policies, municipal with the police and law enforcement, you have all these things that are pretty much preventing you from excelling. And they are going ahead with all these rules, making it more difficult for Blacks to own homes. And if you look at the studies, even in the States, you realize that, I'll be to Canada, the amount of equity that Black people in Canada own is very, very minimal to what their counterparts actually own. And that actually influences the success of that people. So when you ask me, when you're telling me, is it just about the rentals? Rentals is only part of it, right? Yes, they're being discriminated very significantly when it comes to rentals. So if you can't even buy a home, right, because the stocks are against you, and you can't even rent a house because of the way that you look, then what options do you have? So when we're talking about crime, for instance, right? If you're talking about Black crime, you look in the news, oh, that Black guy is robbing somebody and so forth, even though that's not the whole thing, right? In people's brains, and I will say in the Canadians' brains, it's like, oh, well, you know what? The reason why you are where you are right now is because you work hard and you chose a life of crime. You don't factor in, hey, wait a minute, this person or whatever wasn't given a fair chance in school, period. This person had no one looking out for them and they were punished more severely than everyone else. This person may have graduated from high school but had no jobs because of the way that he looks, and they're getting lower paying jobs. This person could have gone to university and done everything right and it still won't matter. So this is the Black experience. This is a true Black experience. And this is one of the reasons why it's very difficult for our people to move ahead, is because we have everything from the government straight down against us.
And I just want to add to what you're saying. There's, here in Canada, a lot of people are quick to say, no, I'm not racist, I'm not racist, I'm not racist. This is Canada, racism doesn't exist. You don't need a racist like what we've been seeing across the border in order to be a part of the problem. Ignorance is a big part of the problem. And in order for us to change these systems, we need to actively participate in changing the way that we think. And it's, again, like I said earlier, it's not like a Black issue. It's not a gay person issue. It's not an LGBTQ issue. It's everyone's issue. It's also not a white person's issue. It's everyone's issues. Because you don't want to wait until there's a protest, until a problem becomes personal, for you to, understand that you're in this too. We're all in this, and we all have a responsibility to question, what we say, to, think about the things that we do and whether or not they're going to be a part of the problem, or whether or not, we can change them ourselves to help them. It requires a lot of reflection that I don't think a lot of people do, but I'm hoping that will change, right? But it changes it changes with individuals. It changes with us, changes with you, Andrew, having this talk. Devel and I and Natalie Chuku having these conversations, together. That's how I think we can start change, and everything else I hope follows when the mentality shifts.
I know we're coming up on over an hour now. Do you guys want to keep going talking? Do you want to start wrapping up? Because I don't want to.
I need to start wrapping up. I got to get going. I got some stuff I got to get done.
Do you guys want to do, like, she suggested of like doing a wrap up of like every kind of like thoughts, and then we'll do just like how you can reach you and then go? Like, do you want to do it that way?
Sure. That sounds good.
Anyone want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a really good conversation that we've had today. And I think it's just important for people to be willing to have this kind of a conversation, as difficult as it might be, and to be open to listening about what other people's experiences are like while they're renting or buying. I think that's really important. And you can reach out to me on Instagram at Devel Morrison.
Okay.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. Yeah, this was a very it was a good conversation. I did have my doubts. I'm a very, very extremely skeptical person. I didn't know what direction this was going, and the main purpose. But if it serves any good to anyone out there who's listening, if people are understanding where we're coming from and not automatically turning a blind eye or just going completely tone deaf, hopefully it gives you some sort of perspective into the Black struggle, or basically, how about the Black lens? Maybe that's what I would call it. You're seeing it from our eyes, our perception. There are too many times when Black people bring up issues that they're dealing with, And from personal experience, I also lived in Winnipeg. I'm actually born in Winnipeg, long story. But the perception whenever you bring up Black issues is that you're whining or that you're complaining. And whenever you say this, like, oh, you just, you know, you're too soft, grow a thick skin, right? Slavery was ended many, many years ago, many centuries ago. Hey, you have Michael Jordan and you have a Black president in the United States, everything is all fine. Or pretty much very similar to what is his name? Doug Ford pretty much said yesterday in the news, that we don't have the exact same issues as we do in the States, right? You ask many Black men and Black women, do we have the same issues? They're gonna tell you yes. Yes, we do, right? Maybe we don't have videos of someone kneeling on our necks, but from personal experience, I've had a gun to my head. I've had police chase me down, police fight me. And this is a person that came from law enforcement. I worked in law enforcement for a decade, okay? I'm fully trained and I'm fully licensed. And I can tell you, it doesn't escape anyone. It can happen to anyone at any single time. I'm also extremely educated. I'm well-spoken, came from a good family, upper middle class. And it really doesn't matter in terms of class. It doesn't matter in terms of education. It doesn't matter how well-spoken you are. The impacts do exist. It is real. Whether or not you want to close your eyes towards it or ignore it, there is an impact. So anyway, that's how I want to wrap it up. Just have an open mind and really listen to what we're saying and really take it in and really think about it and try to put aside your own personal bias so that you'll understand where we're coming from. You can find me anywhere online under Sherlock Holmes, SIRLUCKHOMAS. If you Google it, you can see our reviews and so forth. You'll see a fox. And I guess based on this conversation, you'll probably figure out why I use a fox instead of my own name. So I bet you'll understand why. Anyway, my number is 416-747-5825, and I'm open to any other communication going forward.
Okay, Sheena Thompson here, and you can reach me at Real Toronto Living. And just to kind of sum up everything that I've been saying, to make a significant change, it requires your active participation. And that's everyone's active participation. It does not mean just, going out to protest. And it does not mean just, posting solidarity messages online. It basically means personally asking yourself what role you play in enabling these systems and asking yourself what you can do to change it, because like I said, we're all in this together. No one escapes discrimination, and discrimination against across the board is wrong, and there are things that you can do personally to change it. And also, don't wait until the matter becomes personal before you take notice. Right? Don't wait until it's, a family member of yours. Don't wait until, there's a protest on your street. Don't wait, because we need to make these changes now so that, the next generation of children, they'll do better. They'll do better than we did, right? You have that power. And ignorance, as Chukwu said, ignorance is a big part of the problem. And if you see at the message that Doug Ford, said when it comes to systemic racism. And in that same day, Justin Trudeau said, you can see there's a huge difference in understanding of the roles that keep us in this system.
Natalie, do you want to share any final takeaways, final thoughts, and how people can reach out to you?
Perfect. So my final thought is that let's have these uncomfortable conversations. It's not enough to say that you're not racist. Find out what my experience is, or Devel's experience, Chukwu, Sheena, or whoever that is. Have those conversations and lead with a wanting to understand. So Natalie Lewin, you can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Natalie Lewin Home, 416-903-7653. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
So
Thanks, Andrew, for doing this. This was great.
Thank you all for coming on. Like, I mean, even like as much research as I tried to do, like I never even thought about the angle of like, since you primarily end up almost getting pushed towards working with specifically the Black community, and then they're primarily working kind of in, like they end up lower rates of home ownership and lower price points, that it also then affects your income, even if you're charging the same commission as everyone else. Like I never even thought of like that angle of it. So I appreciate you guys coming on and sharing and helping out. So everyone else, thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys found it interesting, and please reach out to them if you have any questions or referrals, any of that fun stuff. But thank you guys again for tuning in.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks a lot, Andrew.
All right.
Bye, everybody.